Welcome to VUK Talks, the show that speaks to education, health, entrepreneurship, and so much more.
Hello South Africa, welcome to another episode of VUK Talks. Ndi nne host yabo Munjezi Makuba, and today with me I have my fellow vendor man, Mr. Aluwani Ramagadza. So at least today we can mix English with vendor. I don't have to run out of my English bundles, right?
You don't have to.
Yes, welcome Bontunobo Aluwani Ramagadza. Ndi hurini.
Nendo takala ndofunda busangeyo.
Enani ndihone.
Ndizone.
Yes, so the first question that I'm going to ask you regarding the Municipal Demarcation Board is, can you please explain to me what the Municipal Demarcation Board is all about? Because a lot of people like ne article first is already into ni specializanga mini, and I'm sure a lot of people are also asking themselves the same question.
Ndande macheloni vatu bote ndiko live opportunity. Municipal Demarcation Board is a constitutional body. Obviously, we came out of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. Their responsibilities are, number one, we demarcate municipal boundaries. For example, the boundary between the city of Tshwane and the city of Johannesburg, that kind of boundary. That's what we call municipal boundaries. And that includes metros, districts, and local municipality boundaries. The second one is we get inside the municipalities now, which is ward delimitations or ward demarcations, if you want. So with this one, we are delimiting kana rekuita mikano ya dziwadi dza masipala rechipreparira the local government elections. They are mainly done for local government elections. So we do that before each and every local government elections. So we subdivide the municipality inside to make sure that people have got those smaller chunks of the municipality to which they can vote their representatives. And the last but not least is we assess capacity of municipalities. It's the capacity to perform powers and functions as enshrined in the Constitution. And lastly, we can then advise government and everybody else with aspects related to our work. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then why does this process every 5 years?
Redemarcator the ward every 5 years before a local government elections. One of the reasons is because voters in each and every ward in a particular municipality must be almost the same size, same number of voters. So we shouldn't have, you know that in a period of 5 years, people are moving from one place to the other. Some places you may find that you have delimited a ward 5 years ago, people have moved out. In some instances, people have settled in. And then before each and every election, we have to equalize. It's a process of equalizing, making sure that each ward has got almost the same number of registered voters, so that when people go out to vote, we won't have wards that have got too many people or nobody. So that's why we do it every 5 years, so that there's proper equitable representation when people go to council.
Oh, okay. Wow, that is interesting. So can you explain the key considerations when considering or altering ward boundaries?
Ward boundaries are, their main basis is registered voters. So as I've mentioned earlier. So it's important that in a ward we've got a relatively the same number of registered voters. So one of the criteria which is provided for in the Act itself, it says that in a particular municipality, a ward should have almost the same number of registered voters. But the criteria says that a ward may not exceed what we call the norm. So it provides for the average number of registered voters allowed in a municipality. Each and every municipality would have its own average, because the number of people in a municipality from one municipality to the other are not the same. Metros would have high number or high density of registered voters than a municipality far away from the cities and all that. So their average number of registered voters per ward would be different. So in other words, the norm for each municipality would be different. So what the criteria says is that after we've calculated the average number of registered voters, which in essence, we just take the total number of registered voters in that particular municipality and divide it by the number of wards in a municipality. That gives us how many registered voters can a ward in a municipality have. So, but it allows us to deviate from that average or the norm by 15% upwards or 15% downwards. So, in other words, the award was in that particular municipality their number of registered voters will range between the top number after a deviation upwards or a number below after deviating downwards. So that is one of the criteria. The second one is that as far as possible, it's not always possible, but as far as possible, we are not to split communities or settlements, if you may. But this is one of the other criteria that is subject to the first one. So we can, remember I said we can deviate by 15% above or below. So when we are applying the second criteria of trying to avoid splitting communities, we can then say, okay, if the norm or the average of this municipality is this one, and a ward maybe, after we've done the calculations, results in a split of a community or a settlement, then we can say, okay, if you increase by 15%, in other words, you allow for more people from the norm by 15%, will it be possible to accommodate that whole area in one ward or not? So in most cases, then we will fit those communities or settlements in that ward, trying to apply that 15% above or below. But like I said, this is one of the most important criteria because this is where we get into trouble with most of the communities because it's not always possible to fit them into one ward because in a particular area there might be more voters than what the maximum and the minimum allows. So then that would result in a split of that community. That's why the criteria says you would avoid splitting as far as possible because the legislators knew that some areas would have high density of voters to an extent that they might deserve more than one ward.
Oh, okay. And
Yes,
just to ask, what is the maximum and minimum to an allowed number for those voters?
As I said earlier, it's dependent on the number of registered voters from one municipality to the other.
Oh, okay.
So then the norm or the average number of registered voters allowed in a ward in the city of Johannesburg is not the same as in the city of Tshwane because it's dependent on how many people have registered to vote in Tshwane, just like how many people have registered to vote in the city of Johannesburg. So each municipality will have its own average. So those are the calculations that we do normally. Obviously, because we've got over 200 municipalities, each municipality would have its own average. So from the average, we'll then calculate the maximum. That is, we will try and deviate to check how many overall voters can we allow in a ward, for example, in the city of Tshwane. That will give us a maximum. And then we will try and also deviate, calculate from the norm, subtracting 15%, and say, okay, a ward in the city of Tshwane can only be allowed, the smallest ward in the city of Tshwane will be allowed to have this number of registered voters. That's after subtracting 15% from the average. If you're adding 15%, we will say, in the city of Tshwane, you are allowed total number of these voters in the city of Tshwane. So we work within those two parameters, the top and the bottom one, and try and delimit wards. We can't have a ward which is above the maximum and a ward which is below the minimum. So we have to play within those. Those are the criteria that we use. Amongst others, we have to make sure that there's places for people to vote, accessibility, transformation, population density, and all of that. Yeah.
Because I wanted to ask about accessibility, especially when it comes to people in secluded areas like deep rural villages. That how are you able to accommodate and meet them where they are?
Fortunately, when we are delimiting wards or configuring wards, we use what we call voting districts from the Independent Electoral Commission. So they have divided the country into voting districts. In simple terms, voting stations. Each voting station have got an area that it covers. And that is determined to make sure that people can access that station. So when we come as the demarcation board, we will take voting districts, which is like the voting station, and combine them. And that's where we also get the number of registered voters from the voting. Because, as I said earlier, the basis of a ward is the number of registered voters. And we get that from the Independent Electoral Commission as certified in the voters' roll. So that's the data that we use. We obtain the numbers from the voters' roll as certified by the IEC.
Oh, okay. Really interesting.
Yeah.
So when it comes to ensuring that the process is fair in terms of representation, how do you make sure that that happens?
Like I said, we use strictly the voters' roll as certified by the Independent Electoral Commission. And to be specific, the voters' roll that we use for the current process is the one which was certified by the Independent Electoral Commission in March last year, before the national and provincial elections. So that's the cutoff. We can't use any data to make sure that we have a fair distribution of voters. We know that in some places they will say, no, we've got this number, but you find that in most cases they are looking at the remember, registration happens all the time. So, but the cutoff point is March, the certified voters roll of March 2024. But that's number one. But secondly, we employ a very consultative process when we do ward delimitations, where people make their own inputs in terms of how they want their wards to look like. But our responsibility is to make sure that the criteria is applied as fairly as possible. Yeah.
All right. So what was the impact of the education awareness campaigns that were done between July and September?
Extremely impactful. This is an area that the board, I think a few years back, took a decision that, I mean, as you can hear, this is a very technical process that can be very confusing. So the board took a conscious decision to say that before we even start with the actual ward delimitation, let's go out there and conduct a campaign to ensure that as far as possible, we reach many people, to ensure that we explain these things that I'm talking about. From the beginning to the end, what is the norm? What is the criteria for demarcation? What is the voting district? Voters' roll issues. How do we limit? How do we determine the number of wards? You know, those kind of things. Everything from beginning to end. What we have seen is that because what we did is that the campaign, obviously, we couldn't reach every individual in the country, but we used a lot of social media, amongst others, but we also used, we visited almost all municipalities in the country, local and metros in the country, where we invited community development workers, interested parties, traditional leadership, their provincial houses, and where possible, even the local houses at a district level. And in some instances, even the traditional councils themselves, those who invited us, we went, SALGA, intergovernmental relations forums, we did presentations, almost everywhere where we could get an opportunity, we went and did those presentations. But most importantly, our own program was done at a municipal level, where we visited each and every municipality in the country, inviting different stakeholders, the municipal councillors, aspirant councillors if you want, political parties even. Wow. So yeah, our chairperson went around meeting different political parties to ensure that they also understand this process, because they are the ones at the end who are going to use our outcomes or outputs in them in wards. Yeah.
Oh, that's quite interesting, eh?
Yeah, indeed.
And how was the feedback from this awareness since April? Sorry.
A lot of people who got involved in the process appreciated the process. What we realized that also because of the you would know that some of the people that we would have engaged in the previous rounds of ward delimitation, some of them, especially at a political level, would have gone maybe to province or national assembly and all the like. We found a lot of new people who didn't really understand, so they appreciated the process. But what we picked up is that we need to do more in terms of consultations and education and awareness, because there's a huge outcry out there for people to get to understand these processes. And that's what we intend doing. Actually, even now when we are doing the ward delimitation itself, where possible, we still go out there and ensure that this knowledge is imparted to anybody out there who's interested. So those are some of the things that we've picked up. But also, most importantly, lately, people were picked up that they don't necessarily understand that the Municipal Demarcation Board is not the one that determines the number of councillors. So often we are blamed that you have either reduced the number of councillors of our municipality or you haven't increased them as we would want to. Because when you go to these places, some people will be demanding that they want more councillors or they want more wards, and not knowing that wards are a direct computation or calculation from the number of councillors. Because to get number of wards, you just take the number of councillors as determined by the MECs and divide that by 2. It gives you the number of wards. So the board is not responsible for determining the number of wards a municipality should have. It's actually derived from the number of councillors as determined by the MECs. So people would fight us on the ground that we want more councillors. We want, those kind of. So that's one thing that we pick up in most instances. But also, what we've also realized is that there's a lot more contestation on the ground about these things than before, because people are starting to understand what the impact of all of ward delimitations, amongst others, on the constituencies, their constituencies, and all the like. Yeah.
Wow, that's why knowledge is power.
Indeed.
Because I'm sure a lot of people, including myself, I had no knowledge of this until now, as we are talking about this. That's when I realized that, wow, my knowledge was very limited. Yeah. So in terms of people who are aware or who are most knowledgeable about this demarcation, in terms of age range, based on your own research, which people of a certain range know most about municipal demarcation?
I would say it's mostly older people or middle-aged to older people. They are the ones who are much more interested. Of course, we took also a conscious decision that we needed to focus on youth, because we realized that, demarcation is not a subject that interests a lot of people.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Even myself, I'm surprised.
So what we then decided is that we needed to find some ways of focusing on young people. I remember sometime, I think beginning of this year, if not late last year, we even had a vlog where we invited young people to participate in the process so that we can give them some knowledge about this. But also we have developed some partnerships with the National Youth Council to make sure that we partner with them and focus on young people. But also universities, we are starting now to make sure that we have some partnership with the universities. But most importantly, we've used a lot of social media, because that's their playground.
Yes, I wanted to get to that. Social media and like Facebook, TikTok,
Yes.
especially TikTok these days. A lot of people are so glued to TikTok.
Yes, no, we have focused that. We regularly put up the messages on social media, either Facebook, Twitter, and all the like, or X, as they say.
All right. So, how can ordinary citizens influence the outcomes of the delimitation process? Through written submissions.
Oh, yes. That's very important. From April this year, actually the board launched the public participation process in Mbombela. Our biggest message was that everybody is allowed to take part in this process, and that's what we still encourage. We're left with a few days. Since April, we've been doing public meetings in all municipalities in the country. So we are in the last week now. We're left with just a few municipalities. But most importantly, the public meetings process ran parallel with the process where people can write in. The other phenomenon that is developing is that the town hall type of consultations had its time, and in most instances you will attract older people than younger people. Even with the IDP process, mainly younger people or vibrant people who are more interested, they are a bit reluctant. So we have provided this opportunity where anybody who cannot go to a physical meeting in a town hall or a hall somewhere since April, they can write in to the Municipal Demarcation Board their own submissions on how they want their wards to look like. We are closing on the 30th of June for the written submissions. So, but that whole process has been open from the 1st of April up until the 30th of. So, we still encourage people to write in until the closing date on the 30th of June. So that's how they can influence the process, because the wards that we are going to publish are going to reflect in all accounts and purposes the inputs that people would have given us. But obviously, we encourage that when people make their inputs, they must also look at the criteria that I spoke about earlier, because that will also determine whether we accept or not accept the proposals that people will give to us. But in all accounts and purposes, the determinations by the board will be based on the inputs that we would have received from either the public meetings or from the written submissions that people would have sent to us. And the email address to which people can send in their inputs is registry@demarcation.org.za. registry@demarcation.org.za. And the closing date is 30 June 2025.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
I'm sure they heard you. So in terms of a venue, if you want to accommodate to younger people, youngsters like myself, yeah, as a suggestion, don't you think that maybe you can make it more hypey, and maybe to invite celebrities like people like Abu Makazi and other South African celebrities, just to bring the vibe so that the youth won't find it boring? I think that would work.
Indeed. No, we open to suggestions. That's a brilliant idea, actually, which we are taking note of going forward, because we're still going to have ward delimitations even in future. It's not going. This is not the end of it. Yeah, that's a very good idea. Actually, just to cite some example, during our launch, we had a play by young people. Oh. Yeah, we also had some celebrity. We had music as well. We had invited one of the artists at the launch, just to make sure that we balance and make sure that we attract everybody. So the launch occasion was very vibrant as well, and we had young people doing traditional dance and all the like. So yeah, we are very open to that kind of those kind of ideas. Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
So what kinds of mechanisms are in place to review and respond to public submissions before the final decisions are made?
Fortunately, the process itself, especially for ward delimitation, it's legislated. So actually, let me start it this way. The processes that we just spoke about now, the public consultations and all that, are actually an innovation of the Municipal Demarcation Board, because the law provides that the board should determine and publish in a provincial gazette, and within 14 days, anybody who is unhappy with those wards to submit their written objections. And after that, then we confirm. But the board realized that that's not enough. That's why we do much more, which is this process that we are talking about, where we do consultations with the public. All of that is not in the legislation. It's just more efforts to try and encourage people to participate, so that the outcome can be acceptable and reflect the needs of the people on the ground. So that's the process. But in terms of your question, what we do is that after we have looked at all the proposals that people would have done, the board then enters the legislative process, where the law says the board must publish its determinations in a provincial gazette for people to now see how their inputs have influenced the outcome. So that's when now, obviously you know that we are, thousands and thousands of people are going to make submissions. It's not always possible to respond to each and every individual. But most importantly, they must see the outcome of what they have proposed. So we will publish, and we will make sure that through different media, social media and the like, people get to see the outcomes and the words, whether they reflect what they had proposed or not. Then, if they are still unhappy, through that process, they can still write to us within 14 days and say, you didn't reflect what we had proposed. We are unhappy with ward number, what. Therefore, we would want it to look like this. And then they write to us. We will consider those objections. And even after that, then the board has got an opportunity to either change based on that input. That's what we call vary or confirm. So if it confirms its original determination, it means the ward will stay as they were and as they are. But if the board agrees with the objection, then it will change it in line with the objection and publish a final ward. So yeah, that's the kind of feedback that we provide. And after that, we've got a process that we normally call it Know Your Ward campaign.
Oh, okay.
So in most instances, we will be in the media, different type of media, and in some instances even to different forums that are created either by communities themselves, young people, government, imbizos, and all the like, just to communicate the outcomes of the ward delimitation process for people to see how their wards look like before they go to elections.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
So, Ntun, I took note of the 14 days of response. You mentioned that it's not enough. We've realized that it's not enough, if I heard you correctly.
No. What I was saying is that legislative provisions with regard to consultations.
Oh.
Yeah, because the Act provides that we determine and publish in a gazette, and it says within 14 days, anybody who's aggrieved by that decision can submit their objections. So that's all what the Act expects of the Municipal Demarcation Board. But then we realized that actually just publishing and allowing 14 days for people to submit, it's not sufficient for consultation purposes. Hence, we start with the consultations, the process that we spoke about earlier, the education and awareness campaign, before we get to this point. So that by the time we get to this point, people are already aware of what is going on in the ward delimitation process. So this one, by the time we get to it, we're confident that a lot of people would have known about the ward delimitation process. And remember, this one says those who are aggrieved. And our objective is that by that time, very few people are aggrieved. Hence, we do awareness, we consult so that we accommodate their proposals before we get to that point.
Wow, it makes a lot of sense. And thanks for clarifying it for me, because I'm sure even some people will have the same question.
Yeah, yeah, indeed, yeah.
So when it comes to social media platforms, where can we find you?
Most importantly, I would direct people to our website, because that's where they will get everything, including these processes that we're talking about. We go to town explaining what the ward delimitation process is, even the draft wards that we've prepared. Remember, and that's also an area which is very critical for me to mention, because draft wards have got no legal basis, except that we prepare them to facilitate consultation. It's always better to go to people with something to which they can engage.
Yes,
so we have done them for that. So whether they're messed up or not, but the essence is that it gives people an opportunity to tell us, here you've messed up, correct it like this. Here we like it or we don't like it. So it gives them that opportunity. Unlike if we went to consultations with nothing, it would be very difficult for people to consult. If you want meaningful consultations, you must give people information. So for all this information that I'm talking about, it's available on the website, www.demarcation.org.za. There they can also get our social media handles from almost all the major social media platforms. So they can engage with us in that regard.
All right, thank you. And before we finish with our interview, I have one more thing. I have a G20 trivia. So I'm not sure how much you know about the G20, since South Africa will be hosting it on the 30th of November this year. Yeah, so I just want to know how much you know. What do you know about G20 before I ask you these questions?
Oh, I don't know much, except probably what you know in the media and all that.
Okay, so let me start with the first question, just to test your knowledge. Yes, nothing too serious.
Back to school.
Yeah. So take it more as like a game.
Okay.
Yeah, which is going to enhance your knowledge as well.
Let's go for it.
Yeah. So, and then the first question, what does G20 stand for?
It's a group of 20 countries.
Perfect. And how many countries are members of the G20?
Very obvious, 20.
All right. And which sector does the G20 not directly discuss? Education, space travel, trade, or health?
I think they speak about all of those, in my view, broadly.
Okay, but there's one specific item that they don't really focus on. There's education, space travel, trade, or health.
Space travel.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know these things. What year did South Africa join the G20?
What?
What
year?
Yeah, which year did the South Africa join the G20?
I really don't know.
Okay, it joined it in 1999 as a founding member.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so what is the main goal of G20, according to your own understanding?
I think, according to my understanding, it's we're living in a global world, and our economies as different countries are so intertwined and interrelated and interdependent to one another. So the intention is so that we balance the trade amongst each other and make sure that we've got better understanding of what country needs what, or which country has got what, which will be needed by so and so a country, and make sure that there's some form of balance in terms of trade between the different countries. Because like South Africa or most African countries, we are rich in natural resources and all the like. In the other world, you'd find that they're not necessarily well endowed with natural resources. So that's what they need, but maybe they've got technical skills to process some of those things, and maybe that's where maybe the countries like South Africa would have to sell most of their natural resources and all the like. So that there's some form of a balance. It's important for countries to come together and tease out these things, because they don't come obvious. They're not obvious, and they don't just come whilst people are not bringing their heads together and have a discussion. So that, in my view, it also facilitates some form of peace internationally, because you would know traditionally, if you are a country, you needed resources, you had to go to war and subjugate the other country, and then you plunder their resources. I don't think those are the times anymore. So people can sit together and talk to these things and agree on how they would facilitate trade and all the other related stuff internationally.
Wow, well explained, eh? Yeah, very knowledgeable. It is indeed to promote international financial stability and sustainable economic growth. But you've explained it so well and thoroughly. So, which South African city is most likely to host major international events like G20 related meetings? Johannesburg or Cape Town?
This time around, it's Johannesburg.
Perfect. So now we'll go to the true or false questions. And to true or false, the G20 only focuses on economics.
No, it's false.
Yes, it also addresses climate change, health, education, and development, the items that I've mentioned before I go to this question. So, who represents South Africa at the G20 Leaders Summit?
The president of the country.
Perfect. What is the name of the group within the G20 that represents young people?
I have no idea. Can you help me, please?
Okay, start with a Y.
NYDA.
No, Y for young people. You see, the youth of this country.
I'm not sure of the name. I can only guess that Y stands for youth or young people.
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. You are not that bad, that wrong. Yeah. Anyways, it's Y20, which means youth 20.
Oh, okay. Great.
So, and then the next question is, which continent has the fewest G20 member countries?
I'll have to guess. Africa?
Yes, perfect, because it's only South Africa that is part of the G20.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
But I was very impressed by the manner in which you answered these questions. I can see that you know, even though you think you don't have a lot of knowledge about it, but you know a lot more compared to other people.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, compared to most people.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for this interesting interview, Mr. Ramagadza. Yoba interview of the Amanda, you know, enjoy your body and no good as to swing and into the demarcation as a young person.
Kalibu Amanda, the opportunities oraliyo are ziwana. So what opportunity oraliyo ritalucheze bazulapo nga mushumo wa borine uri vatu vakono divoro tuchimbilisa ani arikoliwa zwinji.
Thank you, South Africa, for tuning into this episode of VUK Talks. Uvaka nemkoro wa hamakuba. Ah.
Makhuba.